Everyone, I'm Susan Birch and welcome to another Health Detective podcast. And today is episode 5 of my health journey with Leigh-Anne Sharland. It's been a while since we talked to Leigh-Anne, so there's quite a lot to catch up on. Hi Leigh-Anne, how are you? Great to see you.
Hi Susan, it is wonderful to be back. Out of my abyss, I think.
Well, we haven't talked for a few weeks, so do you want to catch us up on where you've been, what the abyss has been, and how you've scrambled back out of it?
Yeah, well, it's been really bizarre. So to recap, 8 weeks or so ago, I had liver surgery where they discovered the wonderful news that I don't have cancer. Fabulous news. And I think that we've just missed each other and the timing hasn't been right. So during the time since then, to be honest, I've been high on painkillers and didn't know that I was. So had heaps of energy and was able to do mountains and until I couldn't. And then I had, and then I got a warning from my surgeon who told me that I was a little bit too dependent on those painkillers, because I didn't know that you really weren't meant to be on them for very long. My memory is still a problem from my other conditions, so I don't even know whether they told me, but my GP kept prescribing them to me. So I kept taking them like lollies. So then I'd be out, not physically able to do what I needed to do, and be very angry with the world, because for differently abled people, I was experiencing the world as they do. So I was seeing how rude people were, and I was seeing how, Uber drivers don't necessarily put your trolley in their boot, or people don't see you, people don't help you, and there is very little in the environment to help you if you're differently abled. So I went through some anger. I think I went through those stages of grief. And I then got off the painkillers. And I'd really like to talk to you about that, Susan, is when I got off the painkillers, I actually felt like I got worse. And I had 3 weeks where I slept a minimum of 14 hours a day, if not longer. And I was scared that I was going into a depression. And I cut myself off from everybody and all of my support systems. And this is when I was meant to be getting better. So, Susan, what's your experience with people recovering from surgery?
I think in the initial stages, there's a huge sense of relief. People I know who have had heart surgery, cancer surgery, they feel privileged to be alive, and they have this sense of relief, and they have this overpowering sense of, wow, I'm going to really make the most of my life now, and get quite enthused. But then they do, many of them, most of them, and particularly most of my experience has been with sort of cardiac surgery recovery, they get very, very, very depressed. They really spiral down. There is a sense of fear, a sense of their own mortality, and often become almost paralyzed by the feelings that they have. And then they get really frustrated with themselves as well, because there's this sort of conflict between what they felt they wanted to do, that they were going to go out, their life was going to change because they had this new lease on life and they were going to live their life differently. And then it was the same old. And so it's, I mean, everyone has different experiences, but, you know, for all the people who I have supported through cardiac surgery recovery, there does seem to be this sort of euphoria and then this big drop off. And that's why I'm always really conscious and aware of depression as one of the sort of post-surgery events that can happen, and the need for maybe independent support, maybe seeing, you know, and people feel they might be weak and there's nothing wrong with me, but maybe seeing like a properly trained psychologist to actually help them move through that process.
And you couldn't have told me, or you probably did tell me that all of that before it went on. But of course, I'm very unique, right? So I'm different and I'm going to be different, but I was the same. So, and because with my situation, I've still got the unknown. Why do I have the lesion why did I have the lesion in my liver, and I've got the neurological problems? I've still got the unknown, right? So I'm making up stories in my head, and, you know, occasionally I'm Googling, and I'm still scared about the future. So I was in the aliveness, rah, rah, rah. And then I was in same old. And I was in people are bored with me being sick and are on with their lives. And I did take your advice, and I spoke to a therapist who told me some really interesting things and gave me some interesting strategies. And even though I'm a coach and I understood most of the things, and she didn't give me anything I didn't already know, but she held that space and listened, and she gave me a little bit of a different perspective on what was going on for me. And she and I felt that I could be truthful about how I was feeling, because, as I said, I felt that everybody was bored with the same old story, the same old, you know, thing with the illness, and that I didn't feel that I could tell them exactly how I was feeling because I was being too much of a burden.
Mm-hmm. And yet, you know, it's possible that people would have liked you to have opened up, perhaps, about how you were feeling and your fears, because I think for most of us, we put on this big brave face for the world and everything is honky-dory, and you're very good at smiling and sounding really chirpy and happy. And I think sometimes people sense that there's a disconnection between what they're seeing on the surface and what's actually going on underneath. And it's also difficult for the people on the outside because, one, they don't know what your struggles are and they don't know how you're feeling because, you know, unless they've experienced something similar. But also, people don't want to invade your privacy, and people don't want to feel that they're putting themselves somewhere where you don't want them to be. So, you know, so there's challenges on both sides of that equation. And then, you know, the people that we're closest to are probably, you know, they annoy us more quickly, and we probably annoy them more quickly, and so those situations can get quite complex and involved. But perhaps, perhaps a lesson out of this, perhaps something, for all of us to think about out of this is, how do you tap into being authentic about how you're feeling without spiraling down into self-pity, and then communicate that in a constructive way to the people that are really close to you in your life, because you said you felt that the world was really against, people who are other abled, as you describe it. And, I suppose it's about, being able to walk in everybody's shoes at the same time.
And that's the thing. It's really, understanding what is that anger about, right? So the frustration that was coming up for me as I was not where I wanted to be, right? And so I was seeing what we focus on is what we experience to incomplete. That is all we see.
Mm.
So I was in that phase of only seeing the bad side. And I wasn't celebrating the minor achievements that I was having. I wasn't celebrating those. I was just looking at and being supported by people around me saying, doing the pity thing a little, of saying, well, you shouldn't have tried to do that, or that was a really big thing and it was too much. So it's really really interesting, that feeling of staying within your limitations. But I'm a stretcher, and I don't stay in my limitations very well. So it's just like, one of these days I will write a book, and I will really explore these different moments. But and one of the important things for all of us who are going through a longer term illness, I've been off work for 9 months. I was thinking about that. 9 months.
I think there were some other things too for you, because you had a cancer diagnosis, and then after the surgery, it wasn't cancer. So there's probably an element of attaching some emotion to the cancer diagnosis. So then you lost that as a, and then there's the uncertainty about, well, what on earth is this thing that was growing, and what does it mean, and what can I do about it? And the fact that it's fairly rare and the doctors don't really have any answers. So you've lost a part of yourself when you lost the cancer diagnosis, but then you've got fear about what this other thing might mean. And I think, it's really complex when you think about it, because we put a lot in store on our diagnosis that we get, and that explains symptoms and things to us. And yet having a diagnosis actually really limits us. It limits our ability to just go forward and carry on with our life. And I think you and I talked at one time, and I said, when, in the back here, where I did my research, there are many, many people, if they have spinal investigations, who have disc degeneration and all sorts of really bad things going on in their spine, and they don't experience any pain and they don't experience any negative lifestyle consequences from it. So it's more than just a diagnosis. It's a combination of a diagnosis and, what's going on in our head and our feelings. So I think those are interesting concepts to think about. And then the other concept, I think, is about, when I grew up, and probably when you grew up, things were about being tough. You had to tough it out. You didn't complain. You just got on with it. And we realized that just always being tough isn't really the solution. But I think we've almost moved too far in the other direction now. And now everything is about how we feel. It's always about our feelings. And I feel this and I feel that. So if I feel this, that means that it's true. And I think we need to find a balance between, sort of how we feel and how we behave, how we, and how we feel, but then how we actually do get on in life. So we've got, because each of us is responsible for our own life. And, it was you who said to me a while ago about, people need to be adults in how they take on their own responsibility. So, it's all very individual. We all have a different way of coming at those processes. But, being in the health industry, I see people constantly choosing not to be adults and how they look after themselves, because we really are going through a phase of everything is about how we feel. And, you feel terrible I feel terrible even sitting here saying that. But I do think that we need to find a better balance, because if we don't step up and look after ourselves, as you've found out, the world isn't actually going to look after you. You've got to make that decision for you.
Well, I think you're absolutely right. And I think that there is so many different messages out in the marketplace that it's so confusing. And then you've got the difference between like that self-care and the self-responsibility, right? And I, even now, it's like I need my body's environment to be better. And that's a mixture of my feelings and my thoughts and my food and my medication and my supplements and all of these different things. And I don't understand enough about it. And I don't have time to think about it. So I just assume I know everything. And I don't know enough. I don't focus enough. Remember, I said before, what you focus on is what you experience to all else. And it's like, I know I've been 9 months, I've been dealing with my nutrition differently. And I know it's changed since I got home from the hospital from what it was before I went into the hospital. And I need to be careful with that slippery slope. I've lost 20 kilos. It's
well done. It's
amazing. I'm almost, according to my scales, my actual age. Which is really amazing. But it's like we're so busy. And my therapist told me the other day that like burnout, whatever illness ends up being the thing that becomes in the physical, if you're constantly burning out, it takes 5 years to recover from that. up to 5 years, like if you've got to as bad as I have. And I'm like, wow, you know, because we keep pushing, keep pushing until something stops us and we get better enough, better enough to then go back to the old practices that we did. And, you know, we replace them with new goals, etc. And we just get better enough.
Yeah, and you know, my interest in burnout is the effect that it has on the body and stress, you know, and I suppose everybody gets sick of talking about stress, but good health, to me, good health, and we've talked about this lots of times, good health is your body, the cells in your body's ability to make energy so they can do their job properly. And that's what good health is. So if you've got good brain health, your brain cells can make the energy to do their job, or your muscles can make the energy, or your liver, or your lungs, or your heart, whatever. And as soon as that ability to make energy is compromised, our health deteriorates. And stress, of all the different kinds of stress, are what compromise that ability to make energy. So the stress comes from, you know, the emotional stress, it comes from the lack of sleep, it comes from all the kind of psychological aspects, and it also comes from the environment, from EMF, and it comes from nutritional stress as well. And whenever, you know, when you're working really hard at work, you know, like you had that period of time for 5 years and, you know, you were suffering burnout, your need for nutrients in your body, and I always come back to this, but the need for the nutrients in your body dramatically increases. Your nutrient burn rate really increases. And when we're in that state, that's when we ignore our body the most. That's when we don't sleep. That's when we don't exercise. That's when we eat tasty, yummy things that make us feel good and give us a little instant boost of energy. And we drink coffee. And so I just think we need a really new way of looking at that whole picture and looking at health.
And I think the word that just came into my, while you were saying that, was punishment and rebellion, right? So I don't know whether it's from my childhood, but food was a reward or a punishment. Or I was rebelling against my parents, or rebelling against best practice, or rebelling against the doctors, or rebelling, right? So with these deep-seated beliefs that are my autopilot, you know, it's like when we're under stress so much, we go into those spaces, you know?
We all do, like all of us do. I'm not immune from it either, you know? I mean, my only benefit is that I kind of know, I've got quite a deep knowledge about what's going on, but we're all inclined to do it. And I think, you know, one of the things, and, you know, you and I talk about this sometimes, is one meal at a time. One walk at a time. And we, you know, we think, okay, I need to change my diet. And then it's like, oh, do I have to do this for the rest of my life? I mean, that's one of the most common questions I get from people. How long do I have to do it? Do I have to do it for the rest of my life? And you're almost sitting on that seesaw right now where you've done it for 9 months, you've lost 20 kgs in weight, but you're on that tipping edge where it would be so easy to just go back to what you had been doing previously. And sort of lost my train of thought there a little bit, but I think that's where I was going with this. That's where you just do one meal. Like my next meal is going to be a really good, healthy meal. Now, if I have something that's not healthy after that, it doesn't matter. I'm not going to worry about that. I'm just going to make my next meal my really good meal. And, you know, I feel really tired. You know, I didn't want to carry my pack. You know, I carry a 15 kg pack and walked 5 k's up some hills this morning with my dogs. I really did not feel like going and doing that. But it's just one walk. I just have to do it today. Don't worry about tomorrow or the next day, just today. And you do it and you go, well, okay, I survived. It was okay. The sun was shining. And then you worry about tomorrow when tomorrow comes.
Yeah, and that is such an important message, really. It is really look at it in that singular state and celebrate having done it, and you know, and be organized. You know, look at what do I need to do to support that one decision.
Yeah.
And
then when you fall over, because there'll be some mornings where I'm just like, you know, I'll be like, oh, I can't be fed, you know, and there'll be some mornings where I just don't, and I go for an easy walk around the park. But don't beat yourself up about it, and just know that the next time the opportunity comes, you make a decision again, and you just keep heading back towards making the right decisions.
So is it, I mean, I know that we've got to probably come to the end of this so that it's not too long, but making a decision, what about making a decision to keep our decisions conscious rather than have them being that unconscious decision?
I think that's really important. And again, you know, as you know, I each morning I kind of write a reset and, you know, what I'm going to do today, what I need to learn today, small steps to achieving my bigger goals. And then I always remind myself of what my core values are. And my number one core value is that I keep my word to myself. So if I give myself my word that I'm going to do something, I keep my word to myself and I do it. And if you just keep reminding yourself all the time, you know, and it doesn't mean you don't make mistakes. It doesn't mean that you do it perfectly. It doesn't mean that you don't go off the rails, but you keep coming back, because that keeps being really important.
That's wonderful. That is absolutely wonderful. And I think I need to get back into doing that myself. I'm 8 weeks from surgery. Yep. My body, even though it's still sore, I can walk without a stick and a trolley. So it is time for me to make a decision about what I do in the day. Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, we talked the other day, it's a time for you to use what you've learned to help other people, because other people need to hear the stories. They need to know that they can overcome as well. And I do think that, I don't know whether tough love is the right word, but I do think moving into challenging how truthful our feelings and thoughts are sometimes is really important as well. And having someone who can help you reassess them, not tell you what you should be thinking and feeling, but help you to put some perspective around it. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, this week I've got, I'm part of an author's sort of 2-day event. I get to speak on stage about taking the boo out of taboo and talking about these really hard subjects. So I'm very excited about that. So next time we speak, it'll be having accomplished
Fantastic.
my next step.
Lovely to see you today, Leigh-Anne. Thanks for coming along.
Thank you, Susan.
Talk to you again soon.
Okay.
Bye.